an ironic media production.
Visit us at ironickmedia.com.
I met Michael, my boyfriend. We started talking, I think, in October of my freshman year, so it was pretty much immediately. And I didn't tell him I had CMT for like a little bit because we met on social media. If he dug enough through my social media, he would find out, but I really wanted him to get to know me first for my personality, because I think I am not CMT. Like, I have it, but it's not who I am. It makes up a lot of who I am because of what I've learned from it.
Hello, everyone. This is Chris and Lizzo.
We are a brother-sister team.
On behalf of the Charcot-Marie Tooth Association, aka CMTA, we are coming at you.
Coming at you from coast to coast. I live in California and Chris lives in Vermont.
And this is another fantastic episode of our famous podcast named what, Lizzo?
CMT, the number for me. CMT for me.
That's right, folks. CMT for me. What is CMT for me? It's a comprehensive podcast covering all aspects of CMT, the voice of individuals living with CMT, their challenges, but more importantly, their inspirational stories. We will also cover research updates, fundraising, interviews with the CMTA community, such as board members, branch leaders, and CMTA leaders, and overall, an opportunity to spread awareness through the eyes of those with CMT. So, hey, Lizzo, I am really fired up about our guest speakers today. I heard we are interviewing someone of nobility, someone higher than a knight or lord, a baron. How sweet is that?
What are you talking about? Do you even read my emails? We're not doing anybody of nobility. It's Herb Beron and his daughter, Julia Beron. They're the barons. The barons in the board of directors.
Oh, I thought, okay.
No,
all right. Now,
Beron, Baron. So I hope you're not disappointed because they're still going to be great guests.
All right. So that's cool. Now I'm on board. It took me a little bit, folks.
He's
Here
always
we go.
like this. Oh my gosh. I have to keep track of you, man.
Yep.
Sorry. Do you have an accent to say or something?
No, I don't. Let's
okay.
continue.
Yeah. So let's give this intro. I'm going to give a short intro. Herb is a longtime friend and he is on our board of directors. I met him through the CMTA and I remember meeting him, and he and Rachael were so excited to meet everybody at the board of directors. He goes, "Oh, hello, Elizabeth." And I think Julia was about 5 years old, probably. We have this little girl. She has CMT. We're so excited. So Herb is a longtime friend. And now Julia is going to graduate school. She just graduated and will be going to graduate school in the fall. And look at her. She's all grown up. So these are our two guests, Julia and her dad, Herb. And you know what?
Awesome.
I have to tell you, Herb, Chris has a little nickname for you. He calls you.
I do?
He calls you Herbie the Love Bug.
There you go. Herbie the Love Bug. There
I just thought I'd let you know. It could be a worse name. That's kind of cute.
It won't be the first time I've been called that. So
Sure. So listen, Lizzo, just to get things started. And by the way, let me back up. Hello, Herb and Julia. So happy to have you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Glad to be here. Thanks.
That's awesome. It is so great. We're going to just have a lot of fun. And this is a great father-daughter approach to a podcast that I'm really excited about. So we're going to take a little bit different approach. We were thinking usually we have these formal intros, as Elizabeth gave a general oversight here in terms of both of you. However, I'd like to ask a few questions, and it really goes along this line. So Herb, we don't know a lot about Julia, but what can you tell our listeners about your daughter? What would you like to say about her? And then we'll flip it over to Julia to give us some insight on her father.
So again, thanks for having us on. This is great.
Cool.
I binge listened to about 15 episodes in a row on my drive from Florida to New Jersey. So I had a real good sense of what the podcast was all about. And kudos to you guys, because I think it's just amazing for the community.
Thank you.
I guess if I had to describe my daughter in one word, it would most likely be warrior. My daughter has been through a lot from a very young age. She was diagnosed with CMT, I want to say at age 4. And
Wait, Herb, did you say worrier or warrior?
No, I would say warrior.
Okay. Not a worrier. Okay. That sounds better. Warrior.
And listen, by the way, though, if you do look up Beron, Beron, the name does stand for warrior, by the way. I looked at it today. So that's pretty cool.
Okay.
It's in your name.
I think that for Julia, obviously being diagnosed at a young age, we had no family history of CMT in our family, having to kind of really learn about the disease, how it's going to affect her, really trying to be supportive for her. But all along, she's been the one who's been the barren guinea pig with CMT, with nobody else, us not really having an uncle who walks funny or a cousin who has the disease. And so she's been phenomenal. She's had multiple surgeries. And then not to get away from her CMT, but when she was 18, she was diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic.
Oh, wow.
It was totally unrelated to her CMT. And so she's just fought a lot of battles health-wise and has a great outlook on life. And we couldn't be more proud of her. And the fact that she's chose a career path, which will enable her to help other people, because she wants to be a social worker who will work with people who are newly diagnosed with illness or disease. We're really proud of the woman she's become. So
Herb, could you give us more personalized traits about Julia? What do you admire about Julia?
I think Julia is a tremendous listener. Julia really is the go-to ear for her friends when they are struggling with something. And given that Julia's had plenty of health struggles, the fact that she's the one that her friends really look to when they need some advice. So to me, that is a great quality to have. I also think that Julia, in a lot of ways, really has such a great attitude about her CMT. She made a really funny comment. This was years ago, where she said, I got CMT. Oh, but then God mixed in a little bad hearing. So, but that's not enough. Let's throw in some diabetes into the mix too. And so all these sort of things, and yet she's had this attitude that has just really been so optimistic and has really, everybody struggles with this, right? I mean, this is, if you don't struggle with it, then that would be an anomaly. But I think that Julia really is such a strong person and can quickly turn her struggles into, she'll find something that will all of a sudden, it'll go away, and she is just ready to move on and keep forging forward.
And that's just a great reflection, Julia, from your father, right? That is great. And so now, turning the table here, Julia, what would you like to tell us about your father, right? What would you like our listeners to know?
I am very lucky that I come from such a supportive family. I think that what my dad kind of said of the qualities I have, I think I owe that to you and Mom, because I think that there are so many situations in which people grow up and they're not supported by their families or friends or their community that they grow up in. And I think when I was diagnosed with CMT, my parents right away immersed me into the community as something to be proud of instead of hiding it. And I think that's something that I'm very, very thankful for. And something about my dad is he is just, Herb is the best. I mean, everyone says it who meets him. He's a hard worker. He's really shown me what it's like to work hard and the importance of school and work and being able to make your own money. He's really been so great about that. And I could go on and on about him, but I am just so lucky that I have the relationship I do with both of my parents. Typically, you would think that the daughter is more close with the mother. And
right.
For me, I'm equally close with both of them, which I think can be very rare. So I'm really grateful for that.
So how do they handle things? Like, who do you go to for what? You go to your dad. Obviously, when you want a cat, you don't go to your dad. You go to your mom.
Right.
Exactly.
Yes, you pick your battles, right?
And when you
know how to navigate.
In pain, do you go to your dad? I mean, tell us a little bit how that works in your family.
So I think I go to my mom for the typical girl things. When I'm in school, I call my mom maybe like 10 times a day. Talking on the phone, sending each other pictures on Instagram. But with my dad, he's more of I don't want to say like more emotional. Well, he is more emotional, but my dad, I think, has always been such a cheerleader for me, as my mom is too. But my dad's really good with like the medical stuff, or just wanting to be like, I had such a hard day with diabetes or CMT or this or that. My dad is very good in the way you like talk to me. Even yesterday, I was having a bit of a hard day and we went out for dinner and we were able to talk about it. Just being able to have that relationship with my dad as well. Like I could tell my dad anything and I know that I would never feel judged for it. And that's something I'm really appreciative for. And I think I go to my dad for more medical stuff or more school stuff. I go to my dad for my application process for grad school. My dad was so helpful in that. And that was really our thing kind of doing together. So I think both of my parents are great for, I know I could go to both of them for anything, but they definitely do have each of their things that they're probably better to talk about.
Yeah. So I'll just say when it comes to the shopping aspect,
right,
doesn't want to go to me.
So you guys, you're making me think. Our daughter is 21 and she is at college at the University of Virginia. And Julia, I swear to God, she calls her mother, my wife, right, Mia, probably 5 to 10 times a day. And I never get the call. So I'm always like, hey, what'd she say? What's going on? Is everything all right? And I feel like I'm like Herb. I'm very emotional. My wife is very kind of like matter of fact, right? But then there's certain things that come up where the phone rings and I get a call from my daughter. So she knows kind of who to go to, but we're both very supportive. And so it's just awesome to hear that. Now, sometimes I wish I would get the calls 15 times a day. Then other times I'm like, well, I'm glad I didn't get that call.
So, Chris, do you get the play-by-play?
Definitely.
Okay. Definitely. And you're probably glad, like, I'm glad she got the information and she's giving me the play-by-play, right?
And our daughter's in New York City this summer on an internship. And of course, we went shopping over the weekend and my wife and daughter go into all the stores and I'm standing out on like Fifth Avenue, just walking around, right? Doing some work on my phone. And I offer no advantage in that situation.
That's what she does typically. If you go shopping with me, you're like, just go, just get it. I don't want to sit here and wait. Just here, get it.
Right.
So I'd like to circle back, Julia, about what you said about yesterday, and maybe this isn't a good example and feel free to share or not, but you said you had a bad day yesterday and then you talked to your dad. Could you tell us a little bit about that bad day and what happened and how it was resolved?
I mean, I'm starting a new life in a few months, a new chapter of my life, going to grad school in a new town I've never really been to that much, and living by myself completely for the first time, figuring out a field placement and trying to figure out transportation. How am I going to get to and from my work and my classes? And yesterday I kind of just broke down a little bit because I think for anyone, which my dad told me, anyone in your position, everyone feels this way. It's not just that you feel this way and no one else does. That's something I learned from going to college, because when I started my undergrad career, I had never been away from home. I was completely dependent on my parents. And I went to North Carolina, kind of in the middle of nowhere, 9 hours away from home. And I had to learn to do everything by myself. And that feeling, that is something I think I'm the most proud of myself for doing, because that really taught me to be so much more mature and independent. And that's something that's really important to me. So I think just having to do that when I was 18 years old and move my life to this random place, kind of having to do that again in a way is a little nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I just want to also add, like yesterday it started because the field placement she signed up for, she wrote, I'm not going to drive. So she only signed up for things that said transportation not needed. And then all of a sudden she got placed in something and they said, oh, well, we don't provide transport. You need a car. We don't. So all of a sudden it had to do in some ways with her CMT that we said, wait a minute, hold on. This is not what she had requested. And so then it was just dealing with the emotions of how am I going to, oh my God, all of this sort of happening. And so we were able to kind of reset, have a conversation about it, and by the time we were done with some edamame and some good sushi, we were, yeah.
Yeah, but I can relate to that. And again, this is interviewing you guys, but it does make me think of my daughter. Those situations can be very overwhelming. Just going to a new school and who are your friends and how do I get, like when we were in the city, we walked with her from leaving her apartment. Where do you go to the subway? How many stops is it? Which direction do you go to work? Because she's very routine oriented, and that kind of unknown, right, can create anxiety and be overwhelming. And it's tough, I would imagine. Right. And that's a big change for you. And it's pretty cool how you've gone through that and that you have someone you can talk to and you're willing to talk to. Because I think, a lot of people also keep that inside. They don't know who to talk to. And so it sounds like you got a really awesome, supportive parent between your father and mother.
So Julia, how does your CMT affect you daily? And what are the struggles that you face leaving and by living by yourself? And do you have that down pat, or is that one of the things that worry you? So tell us a little bit about your CMT, how you get along every day.
So my CMT is really affects like my legs and feet the most.
Mm-hmm.
Not really my hands, a little bit, but mostly my legs and feet. So I do wear leg braces. If I'm around, like going out long distances, I use a scooter to get around, which I've come to love.
That's
Typically
great.
on a day-to-day basis, I don't really think about my CMT. I think because I've really grown up with it for 18 years. This has really been my life. As soon as I really started creating memories, I always have CMT. When I think back on my really early childhood. So for me, it's not really an everyday thing where I get out of bed and I'm like, oh, I have CMT, so I have to put my braces on. It's just kind of a routine for me. So I would say that like yesterday, I definitely do have bad days. I think as I've gotten older, I've become really aware of accessibility issues.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that definitely gets me very riled up because that stuff is really upsetting to me. So I think like how yesterday with the transportation, and I didn't want to be like, oh, I can't do this because I have a disability. I didn't want that to be a thing, really. So on days like yesterday, I might think about my CMT a little bit more.
So accessibility issues like what?
I just think thinking of buildings with stairs, and a lot of doors don't open by themselves, and I'm in the scooter, so I have to hold the door open myself. And even something as simple as like someone using the handicap stall in the bathroom when every other stall is open, little things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And did you ever have a time when you did not like that scooter?
Yes.
Huh? Do you remember that? Were you just like, I'm not using this thing, and
Yes.
and now you come to love it, right? So tell us about that.
I had a scooter before I started college, but I didn't really use it that much. I didn't love it. And when I was committed to college and getting ready to go, my mom told me you're going to have to use the scooter to get around because you can't walk around campus carrying a backpack. It's just, you're not going to have someone with you at all times. And I really just wanted to kind of blend in with everyone. I didn't really want to be like, oh, something that's just going to make me stick out even more.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine.
About having a scooter. My mom was like, kind of too bad. You're dealing with
That sounds like her. She's like, look, this is it. You're doing it.
And I was like, oh, I'll just walk around campus. I'll walk everywhere. And when I started college, having the scooter really made me realize this is what makes it so much easier for me to be independent. And now 4 years later, I love my scooter. I feel powerful almost in it because I can do anything when I'm in the scooter. And it definitely takes a little bit to get used to it, but I love it. I definitely wish I wasn't as tough about it, but it took me a few days. And I remember she called me and she was like, how's the scooter? I'm like, it's pretty nice. And
Do you know how to back up and parallel park with that? Or
you know what? Her friends would also like stand up on the side of the scooter.
Yeah, so that's sweet.
The kids love it too. And all of a sudden, really, it became less and less of her thinking of it as a way to stand out as opposed to something that was unique about her. Just framed it differently.
Yeah. Something funny is my friends in college called my scooter Sally the scooter. Would be going out, they would just be, oh, do you need to bring Sally? Is Sally
right?
Which it's kind of funny because it went from me dreading having it to almost, even though it's a thing, having it.
Yeah.
Oh, Sally, like she's being silly today, kind of thing, like talking about it, kind of like joking around about it, made it a lot easier to get adjusted to it.
Right. And so, Herb, I'm curious how you respond or did respond to her going to college and the fact of using the scooter and trying to navigate and all of those things that she brought up. Because just listening to Julia speak and say, hey, my mother was like, hey, you're using the scooter. That would be my wife. And I would be like, I'm sure I'd be like up late at night. I wouldn't sleep. I'd be like, how's she navigating the first day? How is it going? I'd be up crying like, oh, I'm going to find an alternative where she doesn't have to use a scooter. And I'd be throwing 100 different things at my wife. And she'd just be like, listen. And I could really get myself in a position of where I'm just kind of spinning out of control. That's just kind of who I am.
So, Chris, I totally see that, and I can identify with that fully.
God, that's how I think, which is...
I feel like I also knew that the scooter was going to be a much better solution for Julia. Mm-hmm. Really, could she walk to a class? Yes. But could she walk to a class and then go to the student center and then walk to the next class and then walk over to meet a friend? And I think the idea of all of the walking, not just one part of the day, but throughout her whole day. And I just thought that if she could accept being in a scooter to get around campus, that she'd just have a better quality of life.
Sure.
Right? At the end of the day, she wouldn't be exhausted. She'd probably be a lot safer in terms of not as many trips or falls. So it was really a great thing as we started to hear the change in her voice that, oh, you know what? I really love it. And when she'd send us a picture of a friend sitting on her lap and them riding across campus together on the scooter, I think it really became something that was additive to her college experience, not something that took away from it whatsoever.
Right. Yeah. And is it still Sally the scooter, or do you have a different name for that scooter?
No, she's Sally. I'm on my third one.
Okay.
Sally the third.
You might have to give one like Herbie, the scooter, something like that.
Chris, you've done so many of those British accents with the.
I'm surprised you didn't start talking like that today.
I know.
George the Third and Edward the Fourth. Sally.
I know. Yeah. Well, I didn't practice this morning, so.
Herb, you've received phone calls and Julia's fallen or something happened. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How you manage that from afar?
Yeah, so not well.
Right.
Accidents happen, right? I mean, people with CMT trip and fall. We were at my niece's bat mitzvah, and Julia, she got a fall. She called screaming, I fell, I'm going to the emergency room right now. Sort of a freak accident, but it led to a surgery. I remember another time I go on a golf trip once a year with my buddies. I had just landed in Mexico. And when my wife called, and normally I wouldn't hear from my wife when I just get there, I said, what's wrong? And she said, well, Julia just fell. She's going to the ER right now. I was with two doctors, and I'm having Julia send me pictures of her knee, and I'm showing them to my doctor friends. Do I need to fly back home? And so, look, these are all because of this disease regarding balance issues and regarding people who have falls. We're used to Julia having scrapes on her knees or like a gravel in the hand if she fell on the pavement. So those are sort of normal things, and you kind of get yourself up and dust yourself off and keep going. As long as it's not a major injury. That was a roundabout answer, but I think when we would hear from Julia, I would say 90 some odd % of the time it was all good stuff. And then every so often there would be a fall, which is kind of a normal occurrence. And we just go into a different mode, both Rachael.
Right. Julia, I think you said, are you going to grad school?
Yes, I am.
So tell us a little bit about that. What are you going to grad school for and why?
Ever since I was younger, I've always been so interested in the human brain and psychology, kind of like the criminal mind and why people do what they do, and just have always had such an interest. And something about me is that I'm very hobby driven. So I will pick up a new hobby and I won't stop until I perfected it. And then I kind of get bored of it. And then I go on to the next thing. When I was younger, I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to work in Disney. I wanted to be a makeup artist. There were so many different things I wanted to do. But at the back of my mind, I always wanted to be a therapist. And I always was like, oh, if I wasn't going to do art, I would do therapy. And then I would get tired of doing art. I was just always looking for the next thing to do. And I knew right away going into college, I like declared my major immediately. I was a psychology major. And I actually always knew I wanted to do something within that field. But it was when I was diagnosed with diabetes, they sent in a social worker to talk to me. And I just assumed that she was diabetic also. And she wasn't. And that's kind of when it hit me, like, wow, this field is not diverse enough, which is a major thing that you talk to anyone in the field, they'll basically tell you the same thing. And that's when it hit me that I could do this for someone. Maybe someone would just kind of feel relief if I like walk into a room or I scoot into the room, just knowing that, okay, this girl obviously like has something that she has to deal with, and kind of having that immediate understanding. I just feel like that's so important. And I know for me growing up, I went to many different types of therapists when I was having a hard time with my CMT, and I never really was able to connect with any of them.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's so important for me. And I was kind of going all over the place. Do I want to be a psychologist? Do I want to get my doctorate degree? And then I ended up applying for my MSW, so my Master's of Social Work. And recently, social work has kind of been taking over the psychology world in a way, because it's just another way to get there and have the career experience from my field placements. I think is going to be really exciting for me to actually, I've been wanting to do this like my whole life, and now I'm finally getting the experience of what it's going to be like. So
Julia, I have some advice for you. Your mom says she talks to you a lot and confides in you. I think you should start charging her so that you can make a little bit of money on the side over the summer. And I'm sure your dad does the same thing with all his worries. He comes to you. So start making a living out of that right now, because I can tell you're very talented. And the second part of that is, tell me about the boyfriend.
Wait, can I, before we go there, one other thing in terms of helping individuals, I wish you all the best in grad school and beyond. And keep in mind, your first patient could be Lizzo. She needs a lot of assistance. So if no one in the family has really been able to reel her in, and we try, but you will be the one. So keep that in mind.
You'll be leading the intervention.
You'll have your first paying client. So.
Okay, can we get back to the boyfriend, please?
Attach the check to the wall.
Exactly. Right. All right. Yeah, I'm interested in the boyfriend. I love this because my daughter won't tell me that much about boyfriends. This is great.
So I met my boyfriend almost 4 years ago as a freshman in college. And he was my first boyfriend ever, first love type of thing. I had a really hard time with boys before. We talked to a few, you go through a few duds. It's like
a few duds. I love it.
In high school, when my friends started dating and talking to boys, and I just felt so different. I was so insecure and vulnerable. I kind of thought my CMT, no one would like me because I have CMT. And then I was diagnosed with diabetes, and no one's going to want to deal with diabetes and CMT, and always was feeling like I had to settle. And maybe the people I was talking to during that time, if I wanted being treated the way I should, it was like, oh, but they have to settle for me because I have a disability, so I have to settle for them. I met Michael, my boyfriend. We started talking, I think, in October of my freshman year, so it was pretty much immediately. And I didn't tell him I had CMT for like a little bit because we met on social media. If he dug enough through my social media, he would find out. But I really wanted him to get to know me first for my personality, because I think I am not CMT. Like, I have it, but it's not who I am. It makes up a lot of who I am because of what I've learned from it. And I remember the first time we talked on the phone for like 2.5 hours. And I was like, oh God, I kind of like him. So I kind of tell him because he was like, oh, I want to like come to your school and meet you in person. And I was like, okay, like now I have to tell him. So I don't even really know. I don't even remember exactly how it went, but I did tell him. I was like, I have a disorder and I walk a little funny. So I use a scooter to get around. And sometimes I need to hold on to someone's arm when I'm walking. And I remember very distinctly, he was like, you have one of those scooters? That's so cool. Like very nonchalant.
That's awesome.
And then when, like a few weeks later, when we actually met for the first time, the first thing he did was put his arm out for me.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Right. 4 years later, I mean, that was like kind of like when like our relationship started. It was like the day we officially met.
Mm-hmm.
But I now cannot believe that I wasted time over people who were immature and did not accept me for who I am, and that I thought I was less deserving of that. And that's something that a lot of younger children or younger teenagers with CMT reach out to me and they know I have a boyfriend and how did you like do this? Or I'm experiencing dating apps for the first time. How do I tell them I have CMT? And like the first thing I tell them is please do not think that you don't deserve that because you have CMT or that there's not someone out there for you, because I could have saved so many tears for years.
That's such an amazing attitude, Julia. You're just like wise beyond your years.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I ask my boyfriend now, like there'll be times where I'm like, do you wish I didn't have CMT? And he always says it makes you who you are. And he's like, I wish you didn't fall all the time, but you know,
Right.
that's good for you. So yeah, he's great.
Herb, do you like him?
Oh my God, he's the salt of the earth.
Really?
Julia in high school would always, not always, but she would ask, well, why don't I have a boyfriend? Why don't boys like me? And my wife and I would invariably say, they're not ready to deal with this. And at some point, most likely when you're in college, you're going to meet somebody who's very ready to deal with this. And so there was never a doubt in our mind that it would happen. It was just a matter of when it would happen. And so we're very happy. Michael's a terrific young man. We're just excited for Julia.
Julia, what would you say to those people? Because I've heard it on social media and other places is like, oh, my husband or my boyfriend broke up with me or divorced me because of my CMT. Do you think it's really because of that? Or do you think what would you say to somebody like that?
I think, first of all, screw them.
Exactly.
I've had like boys say that to me in the past, like it's too much to deal with. I can't deal with it.
Oh my God.
My friends tell me now, they're like, we don't even see your CMT. Like, it's not like they see me and they're like, oh, she has a disability. She has CMT. They're like, it's just who you are. They don't even notice it. And I think for someone to use that as an excuse is like terrible because you never forget that. I mean, I was told that before. And even though like I'm in an amazing relationship now, like the fact that someone can say that to you is just terrible. And I don't think that that's the reason why. I think that a lot of people, when they're trying to get out of a relationship, they kind of like take the first thing that they can do, like what's this person's biggest insecurity and how can I just like get out? And I think that a lot of people might use that as an excuse, but I don't think that that is a good enough reason at all.
Yeah. And
when
go ahead.
Fall in love with someone, you fall in love with them as like who they are. Like I've always said, like, if something happened to Michael that disabled him, it would not change anything for me. And I just think that people who are immature kind of find the first thing to dig at the other person, and it can be really, really harmful. So I don't think CMT at all is a good enough reason to not be with someone. I mean,
and that's a great response. You learn about yourself, you learn about others, and you learn you're very positive and optimistic, and you learn like you don't want to be around those type of people, right?
Exactly.
You know, and why would you?
Yeah, right.
So one question I want to ask as well is just, Herb, is during this podcast, obviously you guys are a family. It sounds like, even with Julia, social work and grad school. We'll talk a little bit about Camp Footprint or your friends calling you. And it just makes me think you guys are a family that I always it falls underneath that bucket of, or within that bucket of giving back, really giving back to others, et cetera. And Herb, it makes me think of you being a prior chairman of the CMTA and still on the board of the CMTA. I scratch my head when I think of the board members of the CMTA, and I'm curious from your perspective, why are you a board member? And what role do you play on the board? And why is being a board member important to you?
Look, I joined the board. Elizabeth, you were one of the first people I met. I mean, I think I've been on the board for 17 years, something like that. One of the things I've always said to my kids is if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. It was really that sort of feeling of get off the bench, right? Like be a player in this, don't be a spectator. So it was important for me, to start learning about this because like I said, we had no family history. I had nothing that I could fall back upon. So to back up a little bit, our son was born with a congenital heart defect and had open heart surgery at 7 months. And so Julia was born 3 years later. We had been still concerned about our son's heart condition. And really, when Julia was diagnosed when she was 4, we realized, hey, we've done a lot in terms of the baby's heart fund at Babies and Children's Hospital. And that was a cause that was important to us. But our son is fine. He's like skating around and snowboarding down mountains now. Like, let's get involved with the CMT organization. And so my wife's a great swimmer. I'm like, I'll drown anywhere, but I'm better now. I'm better. But we found Steve O'Donnell, another board member who was doing a swim in the Chesapeake Bay, and Rachael's from Baltimore. And Rachael reached out to him and we said, let's go. And we went down to the Chesapeake. She swam a mile in the Chesapeake with Steve. The next year we went with 7 of our friends who said, we want to swim too. And then the year after that, we started the Team Julia Swim in New Jersey, where we said we belong to the club. Let's just do it local. I joined the board right after that first swim. We were lucky to raise a bunch of money for the organization the first year. They knew that I was serious about this. And when we moved the swim to New Jersey, we were concerned mostly with a couple of things. One, really, we didn't think that our little fundraiser was going to necessarily move the needle in terms of coming up with the treatment or the cure. But we did know that we had a young child who had this disability, this disorder, and it was just as important for us to spread awareness in the community. So the idea of making the swim into a local event, where it really became a rite of passage of our community, that it was the Sunday of Labor Day weekend, people who were down the Jersey Shore were back, kids were starting school the next week, and everybody knew that Sunday of Labor Day weekend, they were coming to the lake for the swim.
It was kind of the end of the summer.
Yeah, the official end of the summer in our town. And so I think part of it was trying to become a leader in my community, to be able to spread the message of, hey, this is a real disease. You have a community member who has it. And it was great that not only friends and family would donate, but you'd have local businesses where we'd just go canvassing around the town and talk about it, and our elevator pitch, if you will, about CMT and why it's important to support. And you have somebody in the community who has it. And if you fast forward to when I became chairman, I remember sitting down with the old CEO and I said, we got to think of our mission as a 3-legged stool. We've got to raise awareness, we've got to raise funds for research, and we've got to provide services to the patient community who are dealing with this disease day in and day out. And really, to this day, isn't that what we're still continuing?
Exactly.
And Chris, when you join the board, you see how we've grown the branch network and how we've grown the centers of excellence, and now with camp and all the other things we're trying to provide. Well, it still all goes down to spreading that awareness that you guys do such an amazing job with the cycle. And it's part of what we've got to do this.
Well, I can remember when I joined, and that was the direct result of sitting with you over coffee. And I think that was in like Summit, New Jersey or Chatham or something like that.
Yep.
And I was just impressed with what you were doing, what the board was doing, and just had a great conversation, Julia, with your father. And it was a done deal after talking to him. I'm like, I'm in. So it was cool. He's very inspirational.
That's that effect on people.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't say no. Like, how can I say no to this guy?
So Herb, you mentioned camp, and I wanted to talk to Julia. I've never been to Camp Footprint.
Yeah, neither
And
have
I have to say at the beginning, I'm like, I don't think we need a camp. Now everybody's going to hate me for this. We don't need a camp for kids. The MDA has a camp for kids. And I think we should have a camp for the elderly. And I think we should like have a brace program for people who can't afford it. And now I just want to take that all back. I still think we need a brace program. But thank God they didn't listen to me in this one instance. Thank God, because I think Camp Footprint is changing lives. And I'd like you to attest to that or let me know if it is. Am I right?
And I'll comment because I recall as well being very skeptical, right? Oh, how many people are going to go to this thing? Why would they want to go, right? What are they going to do at Camp Footprint? And it's just really worth the effort. So back to Lizzo's comment there. Tell us a little bit about it.
They're looking at each other like,
I know, it's awesome.
What is it? What is it? Tell us.
Take this one.
Well, she should be the one to talk about it because when Julia, she had really never been away from home. And so this idea of she's going to get on a plane and fly to Pittsburgh and go away for a week, like it was so foreign to her. Jonah Berger, who runs the camp, has been a friend for a million years and has tons of experience running camps. I was a camp kid growing up, went to sleepaway camp all those years of my life. And I remember when Julia got there, getting the call and I want to come home. I want to come home.
Was that the first day?
I'm sure.
First day. And then I reached out to Jonah. I said, look, I know she's fine. If something major happens, let me know. If not, she'll be fine. And then the next day it was, oh, I went in a kayak today. Okay. And then the next day was, oh, I did the rock climbing wall and we did a hike through the woods at night. And then like by the last day we got the call and she was crying again saying, I don't want to leave.
That's great. That's great.
I'll let her go into it. But the best thing to me was when she got home every night, invariably, we'd walk by her room and we'd hear like lots of kids together on a FaceTime or a video chat. And they bonded in a way that her friends at home who don't have CMT would say, oh, I know what you're going through. Well, thank you, but you really don't. And this really provided such a bond. And I do think what's also happened with the camp is that we've now created this youth council of kids who started at camp. Now, all of a sudden, they're helping to get involved. They're teaching other young kids about and almost becoming mentors to them. And now Julia's aged off of the youth council and we're starting like a young adult council or something like that. But I think camp is, to me, had a huge impact on my life. And I think what we're doing with camp for these kids is one of the biggest things that we do as an organization is the formation of Camp Footprint. And I can't wait to see, I know now we're talking about a second location on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. And it's changing a lot of lives. It truly is. So
that's excellent.
Sorry for that. Go ahead.
I definitely agree. Jonah always loves to tell everyone how I cried for 2 days.
You'll always be associated with that story.
But yeah, I mean, I remember when camp was first announced, I was like, oh, I'm not going to that. And Jonah called me and was like, why aren't you signed up for camp yet? And I was like, I don't want to go. It's not my thing. I don't like being away from home. Mm-hmm. And he was like, oh, too bad. Like, you have to come. Like, you have to come here. And I was like, okay. Jonah can kind of talk me into anything.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
That's awesome. He's good at that.
So, and the thing is too, not to go off topic, but I knew that Jonah was running it. And Jonah was one of the first people I met with CMT, and I've always looked up to him, and I'm very close with Jonah. So I knew that if he was telling me that I could do this and go to it and that he was in charge of it, I was like, it can't be that bad. So I cried the first night or two. Definitely never left home before, let alone in a cabin in the woods, kind of in the middle of nowhere.
You sound so irresponsible, Herb.
Yeah.
In a cabin in the woods in the middle of nowhere with bears.
The thing about camp that one of my favorite things about camp is this camp was really made for people with disabilities. So everything is so accessible and there's nothing that you can, like I would be in gym class in school and I'd be like, oh, I can't do that. I have CMT. Kind of get out of it. But at camp, You can do everything. There's zip lining, there's the night hike in the dark and rock climbing, and it's all completely accessible. So you can never be like, oh, I have CMT, I can't do it. And then everyone's like, well, I have CMT and I just did it. So having that bond with people right away. Also, forgot to mention, I really never met any kids with CMT before, ever.
Right.
So I was really talking to adults with CMT. I talked to Jonah a lot. I talked to Bethany a lot. So going and meeting people that were my age with CMT, it really was life-changing. And I think meeting the people is the best part of it. I mean, obviously, you can do everything there. You cannot do a thing there because it's so accessible and everyone's doing it and everyone cheers each other on. And just the connections I made the first year of camp, I came home hysterically crying because I was so upset to leave. And I still talk to so many of these people now. I think that doing camp really led me to the youth council because I do think that camp helped create the youth council a little bit. That's another thing that, like, I could talk about the youth council all day. Like, by far in my life, that was the best thing I've ever done. For me, it wasn't about what's this going to look like for colleges or like grad schools or my resume. It was really being a leader. Me as a little girl would have loved to have an Aaron Black to talk to, or Riley Williams. Like, I would have gone crazy for that. So I knew that I had to give that to someone maybe 4 years old, just diagnosed with CMT. I wanted to be that role model for someone. And when I get messages from younger youth with CMT asking for advice, it's like the best thing ever, because I'm like, this is what I want to do with my life. And I owe a lot of that to camp and Jonah Berger and the youth council. So
that's
so nice.
That's so cool. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking you must have walked out of camp or left camp just with this level of confidence that has just increased. Like, look at all the things that I can do. That sounds really cool.
Yeah. The thing about the community that you form, I mean, I kind of have a funny story, but at the beginning of this year, I was studying for a psychology test. And all of a sudden, a father of neurology comes up on my screen, and it was Gene Sharko. And I texted my dad and I was like, wait, is this like the Sharko? And he was like, yeah, that's him. And so I'm in a group chat with everyone in the youth council. So I sent the picture and I was like, hey, look who popped up on my screen tonight. And they were all like, oh my God, that's my bestie. Oh my God.
That's cool.
I have this disease named after him. I think I know who he is. And just even having a bad day with CMT, like, I have literally in the palm of my hands on my phone so many people I can talk to that just,
great.
I don't need to explain myself further, if that makes sense. With my
it does.
friends who don't have CMT are amazing, don't get me wrong, but I can't be like, oh, my nerves were like really inflamed today and I just had a bad day, and they don't know what that's like. The people I've met, it's just, go to camp and get involved with the youth. You don't have to be on the youth council to be involved. Like, there's youth hangouts. There's so much stuff going on. They like always need more help and want to hear everyone's ideas. And when I left the youth council because I aged out, I was so sad. And I said, Jonah,
I would imagine.
Yeah. And I looked at Jonah and I was like, I'm not done. Like, there's so much more I want to do. Like, don't forget about me. Like, I want to make a young adult council. And when we met at the retreat, we kind of like brainstormed it, and he was like, here are some people like I want to bring on because I think they would be great. And this is really going to be about kind of being in your 20s with CMT. So applying to colleges, how to ask for accommodations, dating, maybe sexuality is like such a big topic now.
Absolutely.
Just all those different things that, because it's hard to go into your 20s anyway, but going into your 20s with a disability and looking for jobs and how to ask for your accommodation, because that's your right to have like your accommodation, how to ask and kind of just how to be an advocate for yourself. So I'm really excited about the next step with that, kind of making it a bigger thing that we're having a meeting next week. And I think 20 people have signed up already to come on. And so I'm really excited about that.
Julie, I'm so impressed with you, and I'm impressed how the relationship is with your family. And I have to tell you, I know Chris has one last question to ask, but I did talk to your mom this morning, and she was shopping, but she wasn't shopping. She was with somebody who was shopping. And anyway, because she just came back from, that's right. Herb is very happy that Rachael was not shopping. She just came back from Paris and she was with Josh. But Julie, she said about you, you're an old soul. You're very, very honest and loving. She never sugarcoated anything with you about CMT. And she says, Julie's taught me so much about enjoying the little things in life. Like I wanted to go and travel and big and this and that. And actually, you've taught her so much because she gave it all up, because now she sees that life isn't just about those big things. It's about the tiny things. And so you're very artistic. You've lived on your own. She's very proud of you, and that you're going to do very, very well. And you're a combination. Now, I'm not sure if you agree with this, but you're a combination of both your mom and your dad. And she also told me you're kind of conservative too, which surprised me, but you're a beautiful individual inside and out. And Rachael is so kind. I'm not sure what I would say. I'm not going to even say it. Like if somebody asked me like what she'll like, I don't.
Yeah, she can answer it. Yeah.
No, I love Sheila, but she was so like exuberant. So for her, Rachael said, you're the kindest, most generous soul she's ever met. You're a perfectionist and you're the best father ever. And you're successful. You're a great friend. You play the guitar. You know how to cook. You're creative. The only complaint that she did have, because I asked her what your annoying habit was, and this she told me not to say on the podcast, but I'm going to say it anyway. She said that you say, a lot, and that really makes you mad when she goes, and she says it, and she goes, you like, just be quiet. And then the second thing is,
I tried very hard. I could hear her in my ear saying, for this podcast, don't say, So I'll be curious when you play it back and hear if every other word was,
And the second thing she said was, she had two things. She had two things, two annoying habits. Oh. And this is really nice that you care for everybody. Like anybody can call you any time of night, any time of day, you are there, but you will leave your family behind, her pregnant with a child, to go and do something for somebody. And she's just like, Herb, what about me? And you go, oh, this other person really needs me right now. But what she was saying is, you're so thoughtful. Like it can be annoying sometimes that you're so thoughtful.
That's great. That's great.
Definitely. Agree with that a little bit. But this is something that I do very much appreciate. Like today, my glucose monitor fell out, and he was like, Did you call them? Did you call them? Did you get a replacement? Did you get a replacement? Did you carb count for that? Did you check your sugar? Your sugars are high, Julia. Did you see your sugars are high? I'm like, yes.
Hey, Chris, you're nodding because that's you, right?
You and I are so identical.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I just want to add, because you said I really appreciate the little things. And I really think I learned that from my dad, because I'll come in at night to go in my room and my phone's plugged in and my computer's plugged in, and there'll be juice boxes next to my bed and a cold water, and I'll clean out my needles out of my insulin kit because I never do it. I'll just he cleans it out and he puts fresh ones in. And that's actually something that I just love about him so much. And it's actually something that I've noticed Michael does too. Like he'll leave my charger on my dresser instead of on the floor so I can reach it easily. And that's why I really wanted to say, the little things, you're the best at that.
Oh, so awesome.
Little things. I think big things are great, but I think more little things matter than less big things.
Thank you, Julia. That's awesome. Yeah,
this really is just, nice. Really nice, really impressive. And back to, this is also an emotional podcast, and I'm an emotional individual. And just so you know, I think if 5 times plus during this podcast, I have had water in my eyes, and that is joy. and appreciation for you guys and your family and what you do and your positive attitude. And it's very inspirational, and I'm sure it will be for our listeners. And you guys rock. You're really, really great.
Thank you.
So in closing, one thing Lizzo and I would like to ask, and so think about this. So as a father-daughter team, if Lizzo and I could grant each of you one wish, what would that wish be? And who wants to start?
Oh, I know what mine.
So here we are. We're the wizards. We're going to grant you each a wish.
I dream a genie.
Yep.
I think just the world we live in now is so much different than even what I grew up in, especially now with like the school shootings and stuff. If I had one wish, I just want kids to be able to go to school and not be scared to go to school. Because even me, I'm going to a new campus and I'm kind of scared to go to school. And that's one of the reasons why. And I just love school growing up, being able to go to school and feel safe. And I think if I had one wish, it would just be that everyone could just make peace with each other and just
Be kind.
be kind to one another.
Yeah, that's great. And so, Herb, we'll transition to you.
Well, the obvious wish would be that we have a treatment for CMT.
Okay.
That's what I think about every day. It's why I'm on the board of the CMTA. I can't think of anything else that I want to really accomplish in my life than being part of a group of people who share that common goal of getting rid of this disease. And I would say, and I want people to know, that the board of the CMTA is made up completely of people who either have the disease or their child or another family member have the disease. There is very little wasted motion on the part of the board. Everybody is in this for the right reasons. We are all focused on the end game. And I just want the listeners to know that it's an incredibly dedicated group of people. I feel so fortunate to be a part of it. I can't wait for what the future holds with all that we can accomplish.
Thank you both so much for this podcast. Do you have any last things to say? Because I
Really
am just
appreciate it.
blown over
Same
by this
here.
podcast. I've just such a good feeling.
I just want to say thank you so much for everything you're doing for the CMTA. And it's just, you guys are a huge part of all the good that's coming up. And I have faith 1000% that there will be a cure for CMT in my lifetime. And that's just something that the dedication of everyone, I think everyone on the board has their reasons why and like their story. And I think that all together is just another family kind of. I always think of my CMT family as my second family, because just the bond that we all immediately have, like we're all doing this for the same reason. And I think like this podcast is amazing because someone might stumble upon it and be like, I've never heard about CMT before. And just by listening to it, it's such an amazing podcast to listen to. And I just want to say thank you so much. And thank you for having us on. And
Of course.
just thank you for what you guys are doing.
I want
Awesome.
to say the same thing. I mean, look, Chris, I had like napkins on my car seat that were like drenched, and then listening to 15 straight podcasts to you guys, I was like, oh, but it's just, look, it's a great organization. We're really trying to do all of these things. Like I said, raise awareness, provide services, raise money. God willing, we're gonna keep doing that and get better at it as we go.
That's awesome.
Well, I am not
Thank
an
you.
emotional person, and I have had tears in my eyes
Yep.
also. So that's saying something.
Well, thank you guys. Thanks very much. And Lizzo, as we transition, weren't you going to reference something about YouTube?
Yeah. So we have a new YouTube channel. It's live, raw, and unedited, our podcast, and we're going there. So if you go to YouTube and put in CMT for Me podcast, you will come up with that channel. And little by little, I'll be adding those.
That's
And
great.
the other thing I wanted to say is if you listen to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, there's a place to leave reviews. And there's a couple there, and that really gets us motivated to do more podcasts. And we want to hear from you and even suggestions that you might have for other podcasts. So leave a review if you listen on Apple.
Yeah. The main reason to leave a review is it makes Lizzo and I feel a hell of a lot better.
Yeah,
So,
no, there's
right?
no other reason but that, right?
yeah. No negative reviews. So just so you know. So in closing, Lizzo, if someone wants to learn more about CMT and or to donate to our cause, where should they go?
CMTAUSA.org. And there's so much information on this website, not only donating, but about resources and all the community engagement and the walks and the youth council. You can find it all there.
Exactly. And folks, it does take a lot of money to fund research in order to find a cure for CMT. If someone was so inclined to generously donate to our cause, please go to CMTAUSA.org.
And to our listeners, do you have a good story? Would you like to tell your story on the CMT for Me podcast? Write to us. We want to hear from you. info@CMTAUSA.org. Pitch your idea and we'll get in touch with you.
That's awesome. Well, folks, until next time, we're signing off and we'll catch you later.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.